Okay, can everyone hear me okay? All right, yeah, my name's Andrew Milner. I'm the lead paleontologist and curator at the St. George Dinosaur Discovery Site. I've actually been there since the locality was discovered in late February. And I joined 3 other paleontologists at the site on March 3rd in 2000. All right, so let's talk about Red Cliffs Desert Reserve. So first of all, it was established in 1996. And of course, over 61,000 acres established to protect desert tortoise and their populations and the habitat, as well as other endemic species, so species unique to the region, especially in the lowlands. Anyway, and it's a multi-jurisdictional reserve, of course, run by the Washington County. The majority of the land is BLM, over 45,000 acres. But it also includes work from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife and the Department of Natural Resources and state institutional trust lands. So it's very important for preserving, especially the wildlife, of course, archaeology, and even the paleontology. As you can see here, this is a geologic map roughly showing all the different rock formations that are in the desert reserve. There's nearly 100 paleo localities. I need to go and do a recount, but anyway, the area is super rich, and we've hardly scratched the surface in terms of paleo sites. So these are areas that we've actually explored. I will touch on these one by one, each of these different regions. So rocks actually preserved in the desert reserve go all the way back to the Permian, so before the age of the dinosaurs, so the early Permian, so around 280 million years ago. You can see outcrops of those rocks in the Babylon area, the western edge of Babylon. And of course, the late Pleistocene as well. So all these gravels and stuff that we like to build our homes on, there could be remains of Ice Age mammals and other animals preserved on the reserve. So there were many significant sites, and I'm going to touch on one of my favorite topics, which is the late Triassic and the early Jurassic. And of course, one of the 5 big mass extinctions that occurred on the Earth around 201.3 million years ago. So looking at geologic time, of course, the Earth is about 4.6 billion. I'm going to be focusing mostly on the Mesozoic era. I won't be talking about the Kaibab limestone. There's very small outcrops. They do contain lots of fossils, mostly marine invertebrates. So from around a 280 to 270 million year old marine sea, so a platform covered in corals and crinoids and all kinds of invertebrate animals. There are rare vertebrate fossils that are found in the Gunlock area, recent discoveries, and we're waiting until our museum becomes a federal or state repository, so the St. George Dinosaur Discovery Site. That's kind of the dream. So that way we can keep all of these significant finds in southwestern Utah, so we can share them with the public. So that's kind of the dream, is to become a full research institution at the St. George Dinosaur Discovery Site. I will touch briefly, very briefly, on the Moenkopi Formation. There are small outcrops on the western edge of Babylon area, so right along the east shore of Quail Creek Reservoir. The Chinle Formation, I'm going to be hitting that pretty hard. Same with the Monavi Formation, which spans the Triassic-Jurassic boundary of this mass extinction. And then above that is the Kayenta Formation, the Navajo Sandstone. Above that is the Middle Jurassic Carmel Formation. There are small outcrops north of Winchester Hills and Snow Canyon State Park. They're very small outcrops. We've never looked at them. And then finally, there are tiny outcrops of late Cretaceous Iron Springs Formation. And the Iron Springs Formation, you could find tyrannosaurs, horned dinosaurs like Triceratops and things like that. So there are tiny outcrops, again, north of Winchester Hills and Snow Canyon State Park. We've never looked at them. And then, of course, the Ice Age material from the late Pleistocene. There's lots of potential, but there are no recorded, to my knowledge, there are no recorded sites from the late Pleistocene. So basically, when we look at all of these rock formations and talk about a specific small area like Red Cliffs Desert Reserve, you have to look at the bigger picture. So in the late Triassic, early Jurassic, we have rocks called the Glen Canyon group, which include the Monavi Formation, the Kayenta, Navajo Sandstone. Laterally equivalent to the Monavi is something called the Wingate Sandstone. Basically up here, this region here, this is called the Nugget Sandstone, and there are some dinosaur track sites found up near Vernal. And then as you move into Nevada and Arizona and California, there's rocks called the Aztec Sandstone, which are also equivalent to the Navajo Sandstone. So you can see lots and lots of paleo sites. Southwestern Utah, these are the outcrops. We've recorded over 150 localities that preserve eubrontes and associated tracks within the Colorado Plateau. So you can kind of see these are the range of tracks specifically to this area, these two sections right here. You'll notice the Navajo Sandstone. There's not much recorded in the higher part of the formation. Most of the fossils are coming from the lower part of the Navajo. That's because it's such rough terrain, and there's a lot of rock out there to explore. So please keep your eye out. If you're hiking in the backcountry, there's definitely stuff out there waiting. It's just getting an eye for it. So first of all, the Moenkopi Formation, which is earliest Triassic to lower middle Triassic. So you're looking at rocks around 252 million to around 246 million. Here's a view of Quail Creek. And you can see in the Babylon area, there are outcrops of the Snobkai member, which is very gypsumiferous, lots of gypsum in the sediments, and then the upper red member. And both of these units are well known for footprints here in southwestern Utah, sites that we've discovered in recent years, but still have not published on a lot of this stuff. This is a slab that was collected on the west side of Warner Valley, a track type called Procolophonium, and then we have another type called Cheirotherium. Lots of different types of footprints from all kinds of bizarre reptiles after the mass extinction at the end of the Triassic.
So are there still footprints out there at Quail Creek that you guys found that are waiting to
We
be taken, or have you taken them?
We haven't prospected Quail Creek yet, so there's still a lot of rock to look at. The Moenkopi basically represents a fluctuating marine sea with ammonites and things like that. So you get rocks called the virgin limestone, and below that, the Timpwheat member of the Moenkopi, all contain invertebrate fossils and marine limestones. But in between, you get all these flat-lying deposits very close to sea level, so the sediments that are basically like playas, so flat, very arid, some water. You can see river systems flowing from the southeast towards the northwest. So a lot of the red rocks that you see, so when you go to Capitol Reef and things like that, like Torrey, the Moenkopi is spectacular. So it makes up a lot of the incredible landscapes. And it does have fossils, but there's none recorded so far from the reserve. The Chinle Formation, here's a photograph of Jeff Martz and Don DeBlue in the southern part of Zion National Park. That's where some of the best outcrops of Chinle Formation occur. They do occur in the desert reserve, but unfortunately a lot of the outcrops are poorly exposed. There are fossils out there. There's stuff waiting to be found. So we're looking at rocks that are around 235 to 201 million, but the rocks of the Chinle Formation in this part of the world, which is called the Vermilion Paleo Valley, so it's a massive area that covered southwestern Utah. These deposits are much, much older than originally thought. When Gregory, back in 1911, described the geology of Zion National Park in the United States Geological Survey Bulletin, he called it the petrified forest member. That's what he called it. But by definition, that's now changed. So petrified forest that you see in Petrified Forest National Park is definitely much younger than the rocks that we have in this area. So the rocks we have in this area are really early, and then we have the upper part of the Chinle Formation is missing from this area. It's probably been eroded away. So we get erosion occurring and no deposition. So this is basically what the world looked like around 250 million years ago. So when this area was covered in rivers and lakes and heavily forested. So you can see the supercontinent Pangaea. And if you look here, here's North America and Africa and parts of Europe right here. We're starting to see rift systems, which you see in rocks called the Newark Supergroup in eastern North America. They extend all the way from Atlantic Canada all the way down to Georgia. And these basins are rift valleys like we see forming in the rift valleys in East Africa today. So large lakes depositing and lots of volcanic activity, which I'll get into in a moment. So this is kind of what this area looks like. So we're kind of located right here. Again, all these river systems in the late Triassic, very close to sea level, flowing from the southeast towards the northwest, depositing tons and tons of sediment traced all the way from Texas. Looking at the rock grains, we can tell that they've been transported very long distances. So these are the kinds of critters that were around in the late Triassic. So these are latest Triassic. Lots of different kinds of animals called phytosaurs, but this is the kind of stuff that we're seeing here in southwestern Utah. So big phytosaurs like leptosuchid type phytosaurs, rauisuchians, which were the big predators of the late Triassic. Dinosaurs were around, but they weren't the dominant animals on the planet. A lot of them were very small, leaving footprints we call grallator, and I'll show you some examples. We also have these really bizarre crocodile relatives called the edosaurs. They're totally covered in armor, and they're plant eaters. We have footprint evidence of animals like Plasterius, which are big. Believe it or not, these are more closely related to us than all these other types of reptiles that you see here. We also have, in abundance, lots of large metoposaurs, which are great big kind of mud puppies from hell. They're big. Their heads kind of look like a toilet seat. Actually, in our field gear, when we go in the field, we actually have a toilet seat, and we've drawn a metoposaur skull on it because it looks like a... Anyway. But one of the most incredible finds here in southwestern Utah was found south of Rockville in Eagle Crags Wilderness area. This was discovered while I was doing field work with the Utah Geological Survey. They were doing an inventory of paleo resources in all the new wilderness areas. And this skull was discovered and prepared in our lab. This is the second largest phytosaur skull found in the world. The largest one is actually found in Texas. So this is the second largest. It looks very similar to a very old phytosaur called Anguistorhinus. And if this is an Anguistorhinus, it would be the first record of this particular type of phytosaur on the Colorado Plateau. You can see it's got these beautiful massive teeth at the front, and it's got a few teeth throughout the jaws. It also has the lower jaws with it. And here's Rob Gaston's reconstruction. So if you want one for your house, you can contact Rob and he'll make one for you. Anyway, this was also...
How big is it?
How big? Oh yeah, let me see. About that big. There's a silhouette of Jeff Martz. He's 6 foot tall. So that's roughly the size. It's probably a little bit smaller than Smiloseuchus, which is found in Texas. And Smiloseuchus is the largest known phytosaur. So phytosaurs, they look like crocodiles and alligators, but they're not at all related. This is something we call convergent evolution. So you would expect crocodiles and alligators have the nostrils on the end of the snout. Phytosaurs don't. They're located on top of the head, right here in front of the eyes. So very different group of reptiles. And they were everywhere in the late Triassic. So Lisbon Valley, an area that we've been working in southeastern Utah near Monticello, in a 10-mile area, we've now collected 15 phytosaur skulls from different periods of time in the Chinle. So they're extremely abundant. Rivers and lakes during this time would have been very dangerous places to go swimming, not just for the phytosaurs, but other critters like these terrifying animals called Van Clevia that they're really, really scary. I should have almost put one in just for fun, a picture of Van Clevia. Anyway, they're basically aquatic reptiles that lived in fresh water. They're covered in armor, and they've got a short snout with lots of sharp pointy teeth. And you can see the tail has been adapted for swimming, and they've got very short limbs on the front. They got up to about 5 to 6 feet long. So pretty freaky looking animals. So this is a piece of artwork done by Jeff Martz. Of course, you're going from oldest to youngest. This is for information collected from Petrified Forest National Park. So the upper part of the Chinle Formation is missing, and the lower part is also missing. But we know as you get older into the Chinle, first of all, in this area, we have what's called the Shinrump member of the Chinle, which are large braided river systems. We know the climate was very wet and humid and hot. It was very heavily vegetated in the lower part of the Chinle. And as we move up towards the top of the formation, it becomes more and more arid. There's evidence of forest fires in the upper part of the Chinle Formation, so large forest fires. We know that a lot of the vegetation was kind of confined to water lines and rivers, so the planet was becoming hotter and drier. So moving up section, talking about becoming hotter and drier, the Monavi Formation, very wet for the most part in southwestern Utah. The lower part of the formation is extremely arid, what's called the Dinosaur Canyon member, and then that's overlain by a member called the Whitmore Point, which I'll talk about a lot in a moment. So the Dinosaur Canyon member represents river systems, again, very very arid conditions. Laterally to that, I'll talk about that in a moment. Anyway, so let's talk about the Triassic-Jurassic extinction boundary, which is now identified within the upper part of the Dinosaur Canyon member here in southwestern Utah. So the first time we've actually been able to pin down the Triassic extinction boundary in the red rocks, which is very unusual. There's really good, well-constrained dates from all these other red dots that you see from all around the world. And what we see here, this large C, that represents something called CAMP, the Central Atlantic Magmatic Province. And you can see the deposits of all these lava flows, massive areas of volcanic activity. And this volcano, volcanic series that emitted all of this volcanic material is kind of roughly in northwest Africa, in Zambia. So we're also at the same time getting this rifting. So we're starting to see the mid-Atlantic ridge forming and the continents starting to separate. So North America pulling away first from Europe and from North Africa. And then as you move on through the Jurassic, we start to see the rifting coming down, and we start seeing South America pulling away from Africa. So here's the Dinosaur Canyon member. This is Warner Valley, of course, the Hurricane Cliffs in the back. This is a little canyon we call Olson Canyon, discovered by Dr. Paul Olson from Columbia University back in 2008 when I was working with Paul. And of course, he's very interested in the Triassic-Jurassic boundary because of the work he does in the Newark Supergroup in Eastern North America. So we went in here, and sure enough, we scored. We found so many amazing fossils, mostly tracks. We also, so then we brought in Dr. Selena Suarez from University of Arkansas, and she is a geochemist and paleontologist. And Selena does the paleo magic, we call it. So she does studies on isotopes and radiometric dating and things like this. So she's able to pull samples. So she would sample a section of Olson Canyon, Black Canyon in South Zion National Park, and Potter Canyon in northwestern Arizona. So between Kanab and Colorado City. So great outcrops of Monavi. And she would sample every half foot or so, take samples of sediment in a very detailed stratigraphic section and correlated all these rocks together. And you can see from Olson Canyon, we did discover footprints. This is from our site. I don't have a good photo of the actual Ubrani's track that we found. We still need to go out and collect it. We've got it stashed. But it is absolutely a Ubrani's track. and it comes from the middle part of the Dinosaur Canyon member, which is very exciting. That's very old. These Eubroni's footprints represent medium to large meat-eating dinosaurs. And that's kind of what produces them. Grallator produced by small meat eaters. Those occur both in the late Triassic and the early Jurassic, so not very helpful for dating rocks. But Eubrontes is unique, as well as Anemepus. Anemepus are produced by small plant-eating dinosaurs, which don't become dominant in North America until the early Jurassic. We also see abundant Batrachopus tracks produced by crocodilomorphs, so relatives of modern crocodiles. But these animals were long-legged and very small, most of them, and they walked on all fours with pretty much limbs straight below the body. And they produced footprints called Batrachopus. So looking at the fossils, we can see where these post-Triassic extinction animals occur. So let me go back to this. I forgot to mention this, but where they placed the golden spike 201.3 million years ago in outcrops in Nevada, a place called New York Canyon, where you find these kinds of ammonites and older kinds. So these ammonites go extinct in the marine rocks at the end of the Triassic, and then they're replaced by new kinds of ammonites. There aren't very many species that disappear. There are a bunch of ammonites that actually make it through the extinction. Also, these little teeth called conodonts, which are kind of on the border of being called vertebrates. They're very worm-looking. There have been complete conodonts animals found. They do resemble vertebrates, but they're still a problematic group of animals. Conodonts go completely extinct in the marine record. So originally, the Triassic-Jurassic extinction boundary was set up for the extinction of terrestrial animals, because we see a major decline in all of those bizarre groups of late Triassic critters. And this is when, at the beginning of the Jurassic, that's when dinosaurs diversify and become the dominant animals on the planet. So what we've discovered is the Triassic-Jurassic record in the Mojave Formation, where this marine extinction occurs, is way up here, whereas the mass extinction of terrestrial animals is lower down in the Dinosaur Canyon member. So this is an extinction of terrestrial animals that occurs before this very minor marine extinction. So here you can see we're going from all of these really cool late Triassic critters. We have a lot more animals here to add in the Owl Rock as well as the Church Rock. We've been adding to the fossil record of these particular beds in recent years. So this is already well out of date. You can see this was a paper published in 2017. And after this mass extinction in the Mojave Formation and the laterally equivalent Wingate sandstone, we start seeing a whole different world dominated by meat-eating dinosaurs. So you can see this extinction, dinosaurs were not abundant in the late Triassic, but they began to diversify after this extinction and become the dominant animals on the planet until they were almost all wiped out about 66 million years ago at the end of the Cretaceous with the asteroid impact around the Yucatan Peninsula, the Chicxulub crater. So we still have dinosaurs today, birds. Birds are dinosaurs, if you look at them on a family tree. So Lake Whitmore, one of Ron Blakey, Northern Arizona University professor, now retired, but he made all these amazing paleogeographic maps of Western United States. He's got this fantastic book if you're interested in geology in depth through time in this region. It's fantastic. Anyway, so he actually modified this one map of the Wingate Sandstone to include Lake Whitmore. Lake Whitmore represents a large freshwater lake that covered southwestern, well, you can kind of see where it covers. Anyway, it's mostly freshwater. We don't know if it connected with the Proto-Pacific Ocean, which would have been approximately where the California-Nevada border is today. Again, flat lying, no mountains, totally different than it looks today. So why such a big lake? Well, after all of this emissions of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, from these massive volcanic eruptions. What often happens is to recover, so basically a recovery after this type of a mass extinction with so many greenhouse gases, you get a dramatic increase in precipitation. So in this particular region, we believe that there was a greater increase of water in terms of rain, probably seasonal. It's still very hot, so you're getting the formation of this large lake in the region, whereas off to the east, so the eastern shore of this lake maybe in part was bordered by the Wingate Desert, so a giant desert that would have looked like the Sahara. So yeah, we just published this last month, kind of a revised chronostratigraphy and talking about that mass extinction in the Geological Society of America Bulletin. So very important paper, and there's more to come on this. Selena's doing a lot of great work with us. And one of them is looking at the fauna within Lake Whitmore. And you can see we have freshwater sharks called Lesotus. Here's the dorsal fin spine. We have all these tiny little teeth. We do have lungfish evidence as well. We have a variety of paleoniscoid fishes. We have freshwater coelacanths that you can see some examples here. We also have about 4 species of this group of fish called the semionotids. And this is a fish called Lophianotus. And dinosaurs were actively going into the lake and feeding on these fish, leaving the swim tracks behind. If you look at the scales, you can see they're enamel coated like a modern garfish. So they're called ganoid scales. And dinosaurs were going in and feeding on these fish. And while they were doing that, they were wearing out their teeth. So throughout their life, they're always shedding their teeth. Then what you can see where the serrations are, like you see in the dinosaur Spinosaurus from the early Cretaceous, we can see the serrations are worn down, the tips of the teeth are worn down. So they're probably going in and feeding on these fish. So we also have, so from the St. George, so this material is from the St. George Dinosaur Discovery Site. And the reason why I'm showing you this is because these rocks occur in the desert reserve. So there's a chance of finding this stuff. It's a lot easier with giant excavating equipment, I can tell you that. So we also have really cool plants. We have found some plant material, which I'll show you in a bit, from the Moravian Formation in Red Cliffs Recreation Area. We have some very unique plants that are only found in this part of the world. So they even named one after me. I've got one called Milnerites, which they named after me. You can see it on exhibit in the museum. And of course, St. Georgia jensenii, also very unique to this area. These are all conifers, by the way, so related to pine and fir trees. So the substation quarry, you probably heard about this in the news recently. So in March and April, actually, I finally got my toe surgery on Monday. I was supposed to get it done the first week when we opened the substation quarry, but I'm glad I held off. Anyway, this turned into a ginormous project with, we discovered over 1,100 specimens from the site that we inventoried, and that number is still growing. Actually, Corey Kimber and his mom, Jackie over here, Corey has taken a big block of the mudstone back to his house, and he's basically preparing it. And he's pulling out all kinds of cool little stuff. So little things that people don't usually pay attention to are some of the most important. So for example, in the late Triassic, you get the first occurrence of frogs and turtles. We haven't found turtles or frogs yet at our site, but that little stuff, they basically represent what we see in modern faunas that have survived the mass extinction at the end of the Triassic. So we have now over 180 shark teeth. We also have unique scales that Corey found in this one block, so what we call placoid scales. We have shark fin spines. We have cephalic spines that you only find on the heads of these male hybodont sharks, so like Lesotus. We found over 75 fish skeletons. You can see in this picture all these little craters. Those are all fish skeletons that we pulled out. Some of them are huge. That jacket right there contains a 4-foot long fish and a brand new species of paleoniscoid fish. So before this, we had 2 species of paleoniscoids. We now have 4 to 5 new species. We now have a second coelacanth fish. Prior to this, we had one. We had one shark. We now think we have 3 species of sharks from Lake Whitmore. We have the first evidence of crocodilomorphs based on skeletal material. So we have one limb bone and we have some teeth. We also discovered a brand new plant locality above the upper bone bed. So this is the upper bone bed and the lower bone bed. Below the lower bone bed, we discovered a brand new track horizon. And of course, you probably heard recently that I actually got called in late April to pick a new location for the electrical substation. So it's still across the street, but they're putting it close to Riverside Drive. So it has minimal impact on the paleo resources in that area, which is super rich in fossils. And you can tell from these numbers. So we now have a permanent quarry that's being fenced off, and we'll be working it through from fall to the spring periodically. So more to come on that. This whole site is getting fenced off, and we'll be able to work now an even bigger area, looking at all of these beds in detail, and really get a better understanding of the upper part of the Whitmore Point member of the Monavi, so these ancient lakes. And you can see we also found some beautiful dinosaur remains too. This is the little shark's tooth right here. So moving up section, the Kayenta Formation, super amazing for fossils around here. I just cannot express how incredible it is. Of course, the lower part of the Kayenta, there should even be lakes in here too. So you get the Springdale sandstone. Basically, all the mining here at Silver Reef was digging into these fossilized trees and plant material in these braided river systems that's called the Springdale sandstone. But above that, we again see evidence of lakes, very similar to Lake Whitmore. We're finding fish skeletons and things like that. So kind of what life would have looked like towards the end of the Kayenta with the Navajo Desert in the background. So this is what we call the the Kayenta Navajo Transition Zone. So the climate during that time, what we call playas, so big flat-lying areas with river channels running through them, meandering back and forth. So during the dry season, it would have very much looked like this, like Death Valley. And during the wet season, it could have potentially looked like the Okavango Delta in Botswana. So very wet climate, just like we see today in Africa. Lots of really cool fossils from southwestern Utah. Of course, there are tracks everywhere, all different kinds of footprints. But we have found a few sites that preserve the first identifiable plants in southwestern Utah from the Kayenta Formation. These are cycad plants called Zomaites. We have 2 amazing sites. One of them, the WS 538 locality, when they were building the Southern Parkway, a site that I discovered, and we collected over 1,000 plant specimens from this one locality. Associated, we also found all kinds of interesting teeth, including plant-eating dinosaur teeth, a variety of crocodilomorphs, meat-eating dinosaurs, lots of fish. So anyway, some real cool stuff. Also a possible pterosaur tooth, so a flying reptile tooth. So later...
Southern Parkway, you said?
Yeah, Southern Parkway, yeah. North side of the Sand Mountain in Long Valley. That's where that site was found. It's now completely gone. They moved 5 dump trucks of rock material to the St. George Dinosaur Discovery Site, so we're still sifting through that and finding stuff. So the later part of the Kayenta Formation, as what we call the transition zone, you can see the Navajo Desert is starting to expand. So one of the largest sand seas on the planet was right here in North America. The largest one in the world was actually in South America during the earliest Cretaceous period. But massive deserts, so very, very arid climate. So a beautiful piece of artwork by Brian Ng, kind of at the Navajo Kayenta transition. I like this guy kind of showing his muscles in the background. Okay, so moving into the Navajo Sandstone. Of course, the amazing cliffs at Zion National Park and Snow Canyon, lots of beautiful views of the Navajo. Of course, this desert just keeps expanding and expanding all the way into this area. So I don't know why Ron put mountain ranges here. Probably not that accurate. I think this needs some work. So Lots of great track sites from different kinds of theropods that we know nothing about. So the Navajo sandstone, you can count bone localities on both hands. There's so few sites known in the Navajo. And of course, during introduction that you mentioned a bone bed that I discovered for animals called tritylodontids on Lake Powell, and pretty amazing sites. A lot more to come on that as well. So that's a totally different talk. Okay, so now I'm going to go into the different regions of Red Cliffs and kind of go over the different areas. So you can see here in Babylon, we have Moenkopi along the edge of Quail Creek Reservoir. There are significant localities in the Chinle in the Babylon area, as well as the Kayenta Formation, some massive sites in the Kayenta. We have not prospected the Navajo sandstone, and surprisingly, the Whitmore Point member is not very fossiliferous. I mean, we see little bits of scraps here and there, but it's nothing like when you move further to the south and west, what you see in the Whitmore Point. Just loaded with fossils, fish material all over the place. When you go to Warner Valley, you find all these concretions with fish bits in them, and sometimes complete fish. So kind of looking at, these are great maps, by the way. I swiped these off the Desert Reserve website, so great trail maps. So first of all, the Purgatory Trail. This was found by BLM employees while they were building the trail, and they reported the site to our museum. We went out there and explored the site. And this is something Dr. Sid Ash, who is now passed away, but Sid always wanted a really cool plant locality in the Shinnerup member of the Chinle because there are so few sites known. And sure enough, we got one. And we have all kinds of different kinds of seed ferns, like here, these two. We have types of cycads, like Nellisonia and Zomaites. And we have remains of conifers. All of this material also it's mixed in with big trees with all their branches still at the same site. So of course the Shinnerup is just loaded with petrified trees. This was a really cool find. I busted this rock open and all these little round seeds fell out. And I'm shaking the rock and you can hear the seeds rattling around inside this cone. I sent it to Sid Ash. He says, I don't know what it is. It's totally new, but I don't want to describe it. So anyway, I guess we need to find more specimens, maybe something a little bit more complete. But according to him, you can actually look at the seed. You can see the attachment on the seed. So really beautifully preserved stuff. A lot of paleobotanists, so people that study fossil plants, are not a fan of this kind of material because they all want cuticle now. Everybody wants the actual cellular material with their fossils, and of course you're not going to find it in this kind of sandstone. So if you're digging into a plant locality and you can see in the wind all this brown material fluttering around in the wind, that's cuticle. And if you look at it under a microscope or with a hand lens, you'll see cell structures. And that's the kind of stuff a lot of paleobotanists want now. This stuff is still in need of description, and we have a lot more work to do. But it's quite the hike in, and you definitely don't want to do it in the summer. So this is Colleen Granger. She used to work for the Washington County School District, nicknamed Millie. She contacted me, oh boy, it would have been 2006, and told me about these bones that she found. And you can see 4 vertebrae that were found down in this wash at the north end of Babylon, and of course Volcano Hill in the background, and there's Hurricane. So anyway, we got an excavation permit in 2007 and started quarrying the site. So it started off by salvaging all the float material below, and you can see we had a pretty good sized crew. And we determined the bone layer was actually right up in here, this white colored band. So once we had all the stuff cleared below, then we started ripping back the cliff and digging in. Sadly, a lot of the bone is not that well preserved, kind of beaten up. It looks like, and it's also full of roots. You can see fossil roots. So it's probably a paleo soil, so a fossilized soil, probably that formed after the material was deposited in a river. So we find evidence of metoposaurs, phytosaurs, Rawasuchians, one tooth, and lots of coprolites, so fossil poop. Metoposaurs, some of the big metoposaurs. So here's that same string of verts. We have tons of bones from big metoposaurs at this site. This is a piece of an interclavicle that was found nearby, which is kind of, it fits in here underneath. So underneath the kind of the behind the head of these animals and supports the forelimbs. We find metoposaur teeth. This is a toe bone. This is part of a clavicle of a metoposaur. And then we have the phytosaurs, of course. And here again is that Smilasuchus. So we do find teeth, but you can see they're really beaten up. So not very well preserved at this time. We may go back and open this site in the future, but we do have, I must tell you, we have better bone beds. We have one called the Owl Bench site, which is very close to the south border of Zion National Park, and another one in the Eagle Crags area. We're waiting until our museum becomes a federal state repository so we can then go in and quarry the sites and keep the fossils here instead of shipping it all off to Salt Lake City. You'll notice a lot of these specimens have UMNH numbers with them, so the Natural History Museum in Salt Lake. So that's where all these things are going, including this beauty, went up to Salt Lake. So things are now starting to change, and we're getting a little bit more control. So here's this of what we do with the fossils. So this is that isolated tooth of a possible Rawasuchian, so a poposaur, which were the big predators of the Cretaceous. This tooth is about that long, and it's got serrations all down the edge. Jonathan Weinbaum, who studies Rawasuchians, he looked at this tooth and looking at the arrangement of the serrations, he's confident that it's a Rawasuchian tooth. So that's pretty cool. That's the first evidence of one of these from this part of the world. Also in 2023, this was the latest footprint site discovered, found by Nathan Martin, who just did apparently an incredible job. He's a Southern Utah University student and gave a presentation at Geological Society of America Rocky Mountains section in Provo in the spring. And he and another student tied for first place for the student prize for their posters. And he did photogrammetry of the site, and I gave him a massive project. He's like, I want a project to do. So I said, okay, study all of the fossils and do measure stratigraphic sections all over southwestern Utah so we can correlate it. And his supervisor, Grant Scheimer, was like, wow, that's a huge job. Anyway, he's pulling it off. So anyway, this will probably turn into maybe his master's project as well. So anyway, these footprints here are possibly produced by animals called the Dinosaurs. So these really funny looking plant eaters with this like hog nose and covered in armor. This is one called Rio Ribasuchus, found in New Mexico, but we now have Rio Ribasuchus in Utah, which we're in the process of publishing. So the first evidence of this type of Dinosaur in Utah. So here, look at all these beautiful outcrops. This is all Monavi Formation. There's the Dinosaur Canyon member. I'm standing on the Chinle here. And then this is this thin area, this gray, is the Whitmore Point member, which represents those lakes. And then the Springdale Sandstone, which is the lower unit of the Kayenta Formation on top. Desert tortoise track sites. Some of you guys have probably seen these down in Babylon. We had a conference in 2005 called Tracking Dinosaur Origins, and we had paleontologists and geologists from all over the world that came here to talk about the Jurassic boundary in St. George. So a really amazing conference. And the year before, I was up on this ridge with Dr. Jerry Harris and some of our volunteers surveying a track site that had been reported on the west side of the Virgin River, so way, way over there. And sure enough, there were dinosaur tracks preserved on multiple different levels in the river, in the beds along the edge of the river. So we're standing up here, and I could see these outcrops, and I go, wow, there's got to be dinosaur tracks over there. And Jerry's like, you don't know that. So at the conference, we stopped here for a field trip to go look at the Monavi section, of course, talking about the Jurassic boundary. So I gave Jerry a walkie-talkie, and I took one. And I said, I'll see you soon. I'll be in touch soon. And sure enough, within 15 minutes, we found dinosaur tracks. And next thing you know, the field trip kind of broke up, and there were people like scattered all over the place finding dinosaur footprints. What's amazing, we recorded over 370 footprints in 70 dinosaur dinosaur trackways on 4 different localities that you see along this ledge here. This is one we call the plant pot site. And this photograph was taken from way over there, looking back this way. And then this is track site 4. Right here, there's Dr. Jim Kirkland. So that's where, so this is where this photograph was taken. You know what I mean. I didn't get enough sleep last night. Anyway, so we've actually traced multiple track horizons, 5 track horizons, for over a mile through this area. So these are massive surfaces covered in big meat-eating dinosaur tracks. At the time we published, we had 5 track horizons. We've now recognized 7. So the last track horizon was found in 2021. So looking at the Desert Tortoise 1, this is the first site that I discovered. That is the first footprint that I saw, this one right here, which represents this track right here. So you can see the outcrops there are pretty steep. So this is like right on a eroded point. So if you walk up, it's very steep, and then you can see all of these footprints at this particular site. So this is the south site, and then a map of the north site a little higher up. So the higher up you go, it's easy to climb up, but then coming back down is a little dangerous. You got to be careful out there. We call this the plant pot site. You can, when you're driving down into Babylon and you stop along the road and you look, on the east side, as you look across, you can see all of these footprints. And there are plants growing out of almost every single track. So it's perfect on the gray surface. You could see all of these aligned trackways all across the surface. And if you look at the map, you can see a lot of these animals are basically traveling in the same direction. Possibly gregarious behavior, maybe. Also, it was brutal mapping this particular site. That big rock is still there. We use that kind of as a marker. And then we laid tape measures and started mapping the whole site. I was in a leg brace at the time. I just had brain surgery. So this was in 2005. So I was kind of staying off the hill. But you can see some of these footprints, these big eubronies made by large meat-eating dinosaurs are beautiful. A site we call Babylon 5. It was discovered that year, but we still have not mapped it. So the red arrow is the Virgin River, of course, the edge of Sandstone Mountain, and of course that little old building. If you go up here, and it's all covered in vegetation, but there's lots of tracks. And then we have an older track horizon. This is the site that was discovered in 2021. So this is what a lot of the footprints look like on the Babylon 5 site. Lots of graulator, small theropods, and some large meat-eating dinosaur tracks. You can see there's like a wide angle between the toes, so possibly something maybe like Chianthropus, one track type, made by a different kind of large meat-eating dinosaur. This is the block that fell out of the ledge. That's Brian Ing, the paleo artist, checking it out in July with a terrible idea. Anyway, there's lots of footprints. All of these marks that you see, these are tracks. They're not great, but it's a new track horizon, which is pretty cool. Moving to Red Cliffs and White Reef, the Chinle is poorly exposed. So far, only petrified wood as you get closer to I-15. Monavi, not fossiliferous again, but we did find a couple of cool things, but it's worth exploring. There's lots of great outcrop. The Chianti Formation, again, many localities, as well as some really good sites in the lower part of the Navajo sandstone. And again, tons of area. Like, look at all this rock. All this light green, that's all Navajo. There's so much ground to cover, but it's dangerous. So we've done all our work in this area so far. We still want to explore a lot of this stuff down here. We just haven't had time. Oh, there's a piece of petrified wood. These beautiful badlands. They're small, but we're still hoping there might be some bone eroding out someday. Some plant material. You can see these look like conifer branches, potentially found in these beautiful outcrops of the Monavi Formation. One thing that we did find, this thick bed right here, we're able to trace it for several hundred yards along here until it's covered. But you can see this bed right here, that's the stromatolites, algal mounds. So just like you see in South Australia, in Emu Bay, these beautiful, beautiful marine stromatolites. Stromatolites are formed by cyanobacteria. So during the day, they photosynthesize, and they have these mucus-covered cilia that come up out of the cell body, and they trap grains of sediment, and then they dark photosynthesis during the night, and when they do that, they produce calcium carbonate, which produces these thin limestone layers. In marine conditions, these things can form 3 to 4 millimeters a day. So they can form quite large, and they're actually not very common in a lot of modern environments. But there's a lot of study being done on these microbial surfaces, which help preserve footprints, by the way, a lot of these microbial mat surfaces. Right in the campground, so there's one of the campsites right there. I think it's like 5 or 6 or something like that. So this is looking down towards the entrance. And they've now set up interpretive signage at this small track site on this trail that takes you all the way around the point to the east.
Just over there.
What's that?
Is that just over there?
Just over there, yeah. So I actually found this site in May of 2000, the same day I found the first dinosaur swim track block at the St. George Dinosaur Discovery Site. I wasn't working there at the time. My mom and dad were in from Canada, and my dad was an artist. And anyway, so he was doing landscape paintings while my mom and I went and looked for fossils, and sure enough, it didn't take long to find dinosaur tracks and realize how rich the area is in footprints. So here you can see we're mapping the site to help create the signage. You can see right there on the map, there's me mapping, and there's Sally Stevenson, or one of our longtime volunteers at the museum. These photographs, there's this a little bit of cheat work, but these were actually us working at Warner Valley Dinosaur Track Site. Anyway, so mapping out all the footprints. By the way, this is, once you make a site public, it then puts paleo sites at risk. All you guys love this kind of stuff, right? It's all cool. But there's a few that have to wreck it for everybody. And sure enough, when sites are made public, they get vandalized. And here you can see this is plaster residue in a Chianthropus footprint from this particular site. And I'll show you a couple of other examples. So doing this is completely illegal. What's that?
Somebody came and
filled it with plaster with no separator. They didn't know what they were doing. So this is actually causing damage to the tracks. And here you can see, this was taken in 2021. You can see some examples of some of these Chianthropus footprints that are all over the surface. Also, as you head east up that trail, there's a site that Dr. Alden Hamblin, who was the first paleontologist for Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument, and he recorded this Ubrani's trackway right there, crossing the path, going this way. And there's another footprint here. So if you're walking along the trail, keep your eyes open as you get towards the point on the east side. There's dinosaur tracks right in the trail. We also found footprints in the lower part of the Navajo sandstone nearby, and this is a footprint block that we actually stashed in a safe location. As you go again east, but lower down, there's this great big white surface, again covered in dinosaur trackways. We still have to do research on this site, but this footprint's really cool. What you can see is the foot sank in really deep, and then it extracted the toes, and when it pulled the toe out, you can see that line, the sediment closed back up on itself. So just resealed the track because it was so deep. Anyway, great locality. Then in 2021, Kyle Voiles, from the geologist for the BLM, informed me about a site that was discovered earlier that year, and we went to check it out. And on the way there, we found this little footprint, which I'll get back to. This looks like a track called Wintonopus, and I'll tell you about Wintonopus in a minute. So we went to this site found by Greg Lind, and he'd seen all of these large theropod dinosaur tracks. It's called the Red Reef Track Site. And here you can see Big Ubrani's track right there, another one right here.
Is that off of the Red Reef Trail?
This is not on a trail. Yeah, yeah. This is a very special site, by the way. There's lots of work to do here. So he found these footprints, and then we went to investigate. And this is where the footprints are located, right along here in these bushes. But once you start looking at all of this thin layer above, so there's all this thin crusty stuff, and you start flipping it over, there are hundreds and hundreds of footprints on this thin sandstone layer. So here you can see, it's kind of hard to make out, but Fred Overcamp, one of our volunteers, Fred passed away a couple of years ago. He was a fantastic volunteer, amazing preparator. But we decided to start flipping over sections and reassembling them, an inverted floor. So I think in the future, we need to do a couple of excavations here and salvage some of these surfaces because there's so much information. This is what a lot of the footprints look like. You go, wow, these are really ugly. Here's a partial grallator footprint right here, so a small meat eater, another one overlapping it. There's all kinds of crazy stuff going on here. Here's a four-toed footprint. We're not sure what it is. Here's a little Animepus track, made by a small plant eater. And then these two marks are caused by a swimming dinosaur, also on the same surface. This one's super cool. This is 3 toes, very wide splayed, but it also looks like it's more of a strike, like this. And we can see there's a strike in front of it with 4 toes. So it's overprinted. So the front foot has been overprinted by the hind foot. So lots of really unique looking stuff with this track site. Here's another really cool example. There are 2 footprints. There's this one at the back and a nice one here at the front. And if you look at the front, you can see where the claws pulled through the sediment. Here's a side view of the same track. You can see foot enter and then extract it. So you can see the motion of the foot as the animal stepped in and pulled its foot out of the sediment. So really important things. Now, let's go to Winton, Australia. Believe it or not, these are a track site in the early Cretaceous, so 110 to 115 million years old. And this was recorded as a dinosaur stampede. And here you can see they built a museum, kind of like they did in St. George. They built a museum over the in-place track site. And so it represents what was described by Thelborn as running a dinosaur stampede produced by a large meat-eating dinosaur that walked by and caused all these little animals to freak out. So the 2 types of footprints that are found there, by the way, it turns out the large footprints are actually large plant-eating dinosaurs footprints, maybe made by something like Muttaburrasaurus. So we have 2 types of tracks. We have Wintonopus, which was described as a running plant-eating dinosaur, a small guy, and Scartopus, which was described as a running meat-eating dinosaur. What's weird, though, we find these variations in footprints in the same trackways. So they're actually produced by the same kinds of animals. Remilio et al. In 2013 determined that these are actually swim tracks of plant-eating dinosaurs. And Scartopus is not a theropod. So anyway, Tony created all of these really cool graphics. I wish I could show you the movies. They're really fun. He does some amazing work, and as well as with photogrammetry, so creating three-dimensional computerized models. So what we're seeing here are footprints that look like Scartopus. This is from the Southern Parkway locality, that 538 site I was telling you about. And we also find associated, now this is from out east, the Newark supergroup. This is what Animepus footprints look like, but we find them associated at this same Southern Parkway site. And they're very Wintonopus-like. So, by the way, the name Scartopus is now no longer used. It's been synonymized and put into with Wintonopus. So this footprint that I showed you before looks very much like the Wintonopus track. So most likely, we have lots of animals at this site in Red Cliffs that are animals going into the water and swimming. So it's a really important locality. To top it off, the same day, our dedicated and long-time volunteer, David Sloff, some of you probably know him. He's an incredible tracks collector and fossil collector. He started with us in 2001. There's David laying next to one of his finds. Sure enough, he was out hiking around, going higher up into the formation, and came across hundreds of blocks covered in dinosaur swim tracks. So you can see these toe strikes right here, some really cool footprints. So there's a lot more work to do at these particular sites. We can also see beautiful invertebrate burrows. A lot of this stuff that we're finding in the Kayenta-Navajo transition looks very similar to stuff that we find at Red Hills Desert Garden at the north end of St. George. And I'll talk about those in a moment. As you move up section into the Navajo, so the lower part of the Navajo, in the Red Cliffs area, we do find, there are a couple of blocks that we discovered with dinosaur tracks on them and footprints called Brazilichnium, which are produced by possible synapsids, so mammal-like animals. We also found footprints on a loose slab of Batrachopus, which are made by small crocodilomorphs. Impossible to see, but way back in there, on that surface, there's Don DeBlue and Gary Hunt from the Utah Geological Survey looking at that big surface. We still have to climb back up here one of these days when we have nothing else to do photogrammetry of this surface. It's hard to see, but all these little bumps are multiple animals moving in the same direction. So these are, again, some more of these mammal-like animals. So very much like these guys. This is an animal called Kayenta-Therium. This piece of art by Brian Ng was done based on our discovery of trithylodontid bone beds at Lake Powell in the uppermost Kayenta Formation in Lower Navajo. We're going back to Lake Powell in the fall to keep looking. We know we're going to find more bone sites. We also found these really cool footprints. You can see these sets of alternating tracks here. Believe it or not, there is another one on this side. They compare well with something called octopod ichneus. This is the holotype of a specimen that's found in the Coconino sandstone in the early Permian from Arizona. And this is at the collections in Boulder, Colorado, one of Martin Lockley's collections. And if you compare, they match very well. So you're basically talking a spider about the size of a dinner plate walking across the surface. You also have massive scorpions. We collected a specimen last fall of a big scorpion trackway as well, and that's now going on exhibit in Zion National Park at the museum. Moving to Mill Creek and Grapevine Pass, again, we haven't hit enough outcrop. And there's some great stuff. I drive by it going to work every day, and I'm just like looking at it, like, wow, we got to get out there and look at this stuff. Yeah, so all those nice trails back in the region, there's got to be some great stuff in there. Again, we haven't prospected the Navajo and the Kayenta. We have lots of footprint sites, but there's tons of area to cover. There are also lots of great track sites nearby. So you go down Grapevine Pass Wash, down here south of exit 13 on state land, and it's an area that the state has fenced off, and they've opened it for interpretation. It's called the Grapevine Pass Wash Track Site. I prefer the Spectrum Track Site when it was first reported in the Spectrum newspaper.
Did it just open Grapevine?
What's that?
Did Grapevine just barely open? Because they were talking about how they just made it into a public walkway.
Oh, with the footprints?
Just the Grapevine area.
Yeah, there's a lot of good trails in there.
Like signs that tell you about it.
They're starting to set up signage. I've been working with them on a track site that I'll get to in a second, which is called the Washington Water Tank site, which is also pretty cool. Small track site, always getting covered with sand, unfortunately, because it's right in the bottom of a wash. But the Grapevine Pass track site, well over 100 large Eubrontes footprints. Some of them are like this big, so there's some monsters. And 98% of the animals are all moving in the same direction. So they're going this way, heading that way. And you can see some of these beautiful footprints. Right here, this little girl sitting next to this big track. This block, we found the fence ripped down, and somebody had come in with a piece of equipment and ripped part of the rock out to try and steal a dinosaur track that was mapped. So that's that block. They weren't successful in getting it out. So anyway, this kind of thing happens when you make a site public. And this is back in 2005 during that Tracking Dinosaur Origins conference. So there's a lot of famous paleontologists in that picture. Yeah, pretty cool. This is the water tank track site. So this was discovered when they released water from the water tank up on the hill, and it came down the wash, and it cleaned all of that surface off. And you can see it's beautiful, the footprints on the surface when it's clean. So you get people on mountain bikes that come by, they tend to stay off to the side. But again, this site's been vandalized. You see where Martin Lockley is sitting right here. There was a mound of sand. Somebody had put a mound of sand over this, and you can see what they did. They tried to make a replica and failed. You can see their chisel marks where they tried to get the plaster out of the track. So Martin, with his buck knife and a little geology hammer and his skills, managed to get the plaster out of the footprint. And on exhibit at the museum in St. George, we actually have this attempted replica, so this thing, along with a proper replica of the same footprint. So there's techniques that you use to do this. So again, it's also illegal on federal or state land or on private land without permission to do this. I can't emphasize that enough. Also at this site, we were in there in 2007 with a bunch of school kids cleaning up the track site. So they were learning how to measure footprints and, great educational opportunity. And we started investigating these large footprints that come through this area where the kids are sitting. And we found a third one going back, and you can see these massive tracks. So great big theropod, and it's sinking in very deep, leaving impressions of the metatarsal, which is an extension of the foot. So moving to the southern extent of the park, so City Creek, we actually have no sites down here. And there's all this rock. We just have to go on and walk up the Pioneer Trail and stuff like that and start looking around. But right here, near Pioneer Park, is the Red Cliffs, is Desert Garden. So part of the Washington County Water Conservancy District. So when they were building the Water Conservancy District, they moved all this rock to the side. And we started going through the rock piles with permission, and we made some really cool discoveries. These were the first recorded Anomepus tracks from southwestern Utah. We have a replica of this specimen at the museum. The original is with the Washington County Water Conservancy District. We went around and looked and surveyed all of the rocks, decorative rocks that they have around the building, and found dinosaur tracks all over the place, including little tiny meat-eating dinosaur tracks that we collected out of the pile, and then these great big 3 to 4-toed, blunt-toed swim tracks. This is a block when it was still in the rock pile, and the equipment operator did an incredible job getting this out. And you can see these long series of tracks. These are now in the Desert Garden. They're talking about putting a canopy over the footprints to keep them preserved, because these are one of a kind. We believe that these are produced by swimming sauropodomorphs, so the precursors to large, long-necked, long-tailed sauropod dinosaurs like Brachiosaurus and Apatosaurus that you see in the late Jurassic.
Where in the garden are they?
What's that?
Where in the garden are
So the east side of the park. So you go all the way to the east, and as it makes that turn, and you can see the Water Conservancy District building, there's a small gazebo where you can get shade. They're right there on the ground.
they? So it's in the pathways?
Yeah, so it's right next to the pathway. We're helping them with new signage for interpretation. So here we go. This is another piece of Brian Ing's art, and you can see we have turtles and fish, even tritylodonts swimming in the background. So this is right in the Achaean Navajo transition. And you can see large sauropodomorphs like Sarasaurus swimming in the river. Yep.
So it's like your dig site, there was a great big swim mark, a huge one, but because it wasn't complete, you had it just sitting off to the side. Is that same?
It's the latex peel laying on the track site. Yes, that's exactly the same specimen. Yeah. We're about ready to make a replica of it, but we need to do it lightweight. We can't do this one with plaster. It's just too big. We also have meat-eating dinosaur swim tracks, so kind of represented here in this picture. So lots of those. You can also see the surface is covered with burrows called Rhizocorallium. We also see Rhizocorallium at the Red Cliffs area track site, those new ones that David found. So the similar kind of sediment deposit, so very, very similar. Also stratigraphically, when we look at the layers, it's very similar in age. We're getting close to being done. Moving all the way to the west in the Red Mountain area, very poorly prospected. There are important sites in the Monabi, really good Monabi sites, but nothing actually from within the reserve. So looking at all of those outcrops, you can see one of the problems. It's so steep. Also, there's not a lot of float rock. This is mostly mudstones, siltstones with thin sandstones, and it's super steep. So getting around on that stuff, looking for fossils, it's very difficult. But the Kayenta and Navajo are really, really well represented. And of course, now it's a wilderness area too, so you've got to be careful going in there. The Utah Geological Survey did prospecting in there in 2009, 2010, and they did find one track site. And you can see this one specimen that Don DeBlue found. There's the locality number. What's really cool as well, it's got all these neat salt crystal casts. They're kind of radiating salt crystal casts, like almost clusters of salt crystals growing outward. So kind of indicating very arid conditions. So there's Don and Gary. That's with that big phytosaur skull, by the way, in Eagle Crags. But they were the two main guys that were out hiking around, having a good time for a few months. And then the Hell's Hole area, near the trailhead, on private land, you can see this beautiful Brachycarytherium trackway, part and counterpart. We did collect it with a rock saw. And Connor Bennett, one of the paleontologists at Zion National Park, well, he's at University of Tennessee right now, but yeah, he's going to be back working full-time at the park after he gets his degree. And there's Hunter Carter, our prep lab manager, and Julissa Buckwitz, my assistant curator. Anyway, we managed to get that stuff collected with the help of Rocksaw. So again, produced by tritylodonted-like animals. And then the Kayenta Wash site, again, on private land. There are small exposures of Monabi Formation within the Red Mountain area, but there's not a lot of it. But in Kayenta Wash, on private land, we did find, this used to be a trail, and the trail used to come up right over this track site. A really, really nice track site. It's trampled with dinosaur footprints, from little guys to pretty good sized footprints. And you can see some examples. So some of them are really difficult to make out. There's another one right there. You can see the claw drag mark. But what's really cool, also up the wash in the Springdale sandstone, a petrified tree, pretty good sized one. But this lower bed right here, we did make a really important find. Believe it or not, they're clamshells, so bivalves, and they're a group called the Unionids. And these are the first body fossils of Unionid, any bivalves, any mollusk found in the Monabi Formation. So we're going back to collect samples, and hopefully we can get better identifications on these things. Anyway, again, fossil collecting laws, so vertebrates, body fossils, as well as traces, which include tracks, and coprolites and certain things like that produced by vertebrates. Under the Paleontological Resources Protection Act, established in 2009, they're protected. And of course, going back all the way to the Antiquities Act. So paleo permits are required for collecting vertebrate fossils on Utah state and federal lands. And the best thing to do if you guys come across anything, take photos. Take photographs with something for scale. Take photographs so you can see the surrounding landscape, so you can relocate the site. And if you have a GPS unit, GPS them. Very important. And then bring them, you can let me know. You can take them to local university, to geologists and things like that. That's the kind of thing you need to do when you find these sites. And of course, you get credit for making the discovery. Anyway, thank you to so many people for all the incredible work. I must say that the substation quarry, we had over 700 people sign up to volunteer, and we had over 500 people that actually participated in the quarry, and we made some amazing new friends. It gives me faith in the region again. I wasn't too sure if people really liked the St. George Dinosaur Discovery Site, but the support that we received was incredible. And we've made so many new friends and lots of new volunteers. All right, thank you, everyone.